The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
Christian Wilkins started training camp on the PUP list, the physically unable to perform. Now he has been informed of his release.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast.
It is all about Christian Wilkins. If you didn't know, now you know. We'll jump right into that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, and that's Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Now, it was wild. I was on my radio show on Thursday. It was almost over. It's 4:30. I know we were about to go to commercial. No joke, Raider Nation. We were about to go to commercial. I was about to tee up and tease the next segment and throw out the phone number to get some calls and texts and everything. And then all of a sudden I saw this tweet from Adam Schefter. And so before we went to commercial, I said, wait, hold on, I got to read it. So in real time, and look, I'm a guy who talks a lot, as you know. Anyone who has listened to this show for a day, 20 days, 20, whatever, you know what I mean? For the longest time, you know I like to talk. I was at a loss of words when I saw this tweet from Adam Schefter come rolling down. ESPN sources, Raiders are releasing defensive tackle Christian Wilkins with the designation of terminated vested veteran. His time in Las Vegas is now over. Due to how Wilkins treated the rehab from his foot injury he suffered last season, the Raiders voided the remaining $35.2 million of guaranteed money left on Wilkins' contract last month, and today, Wilkins filed a grievance with the NFLPA. I literally had to read that about 4 times. One, to make sure that wasn't a fake Adam Schefter tweet, right? You know, there's so many of those fake accounts out there. And then I had to process it, but I'm trying to relay it on the radio in real time. Like right now, I'm able to do it and say it smoothly, but I must have messed those words up about 5 times as I was trying to read it just because, again, didn't believe it. Everything that we had heard, or everything that I had heard at least, I don't want to speak for everybody, but everything that I had heard is that he was actually pretty close to coming back, and there was a chance that he could be available before, you know, the 4th game of the season, somewhere in between week 1 and week 4. That was some sounds and some thoughts that I had been getting from other people, and, well, clearly that was not the case. So Schefter went on another tweet and said, with the Raiders voiding the remainder $35.2 million in guaranteed money left on Christian Wilkins' contract last month, and Wilkins filing agreements with the NFLPA today, this is a situation that is far from over. The NFLPA had 50 days to file agreements on behalf of Christian Wilkins after the Raiders voided the money of guaranteed money in his contract on June 4th. $8 million for this year, $27.25 million for next year. The agreement was filed this morning. A legal battle awaits. So this is a situation that's probably going to get really ugly between the NFLPA, between the Raiders. Obviously, there's going to be lawyers involved. And I thought Adam Hill of the Las Vegas Review-Journal, he's also part of my sister station here in Las Vegas, ESPN Las Vegas. He tweeted this out. About to see the first real test of the new NFLPA regime, as the Christian Wilkins saga is probably going to get wild. Wilkins, on a side note, was the Raiders player rep. So the player rep for the Raiders when it comes to the NFLPA was Christian Wilkins. Now, obviously, they're going to have to find another guy, but the NFLPA is going to get involved. And, you know, I've been bringing up on the show everything that's been going on in the situation between the NFL and the NFLPA and how it was getting messy, and there was a lot of layers to it. Now, this is just going to add to it. And as Adam Hill said, it's really going to test the strength of the NFLPA at this stage of the game. Also, to Sean Reed from The Athletic, during the offseason, the Raiders determined that defensive tackle Christian Wilkins needed another procedure in order for his injured left foot to heal. Per source, Wilkins disagreed, sparking a dispute that ultimately led to his release. So remember, he suffered this injury in week 5, right? He had the surgery in October, and now we're looking at the end of July, and he's still not ready to go. All offseason, we've been talking about in a boot, out of a boot, out of a boot, in a boot, what's going to happen with him, right? And then, of course, he starts training camp on the PUP list, and all we're talking about and all I'm focused in on is he still on the PUP list when they get to the end of training camp? Because if so, he's going to miss the first 4 games. It does not matter. Ian Rappaport of NFL Network, Rap Sheet, he put this out, had this statement to make on the Christian Wilkins release, trying to summarize everything that had gone on. Check it out.
The Las Vegas Raiders with a stunner. Sources say Christian Wilkins, the prize of free agency just a year ago, has been informed of his release 1 year into a 5-year, $110 million deal. Has got much of that $57.5 million fully guaranteed. Already got a $20 million check of it this spring, already still in the books for about, I believe it is 8 this season. The Raiders deciding they are not moving forward with Christian Wilkins any longer. This has been an ongoing saga for many reasons for the Las Vegas Raiders, but on the field as it pertains to Wilkins, my understanding is the team wanted him to have surgery on his foot. He declined several medical opinions, ultimately decided he wanted to rehab this. It has been a battle to get him on the field. Certainly there has been discord as it relates to Christian Wilkins and the Raiders. He has now been released. An early training camp surprise for Pete Carroll, for John Spytek, and for the Las Vegas Raiders. Christian Wilkins is out.
Ian Rappaport of NFL Network just kind of summarizing what had been going on with Christian Wilkins and how this had all of a sudden become a battle. And right, a lot of folks saw, and I saw this on social media as well, right before training camp got started, Christian Wilkins, a video of him in the Raiders locker room, and he was dancing to some Backstreet Boys sound. And I don't know, I never knew how old that video was. If it was old, I know the Backstreet Boys were in Las Vegas, so it seemed like it was pretty current. But if, they took away his money back in June, I can't imagine that in July he was in the Raiders weight room having a good time and dancing and celebrating all that. So that to me kind of caught me off guard. But this right here is what I thought really were the words that really kind of let you know where this staff is and how they felt about this situation. And matter of fact, before I even read the statement, think about this. Remember on Tuesday when Pete Carroll opened up the training camp with his press conference, and the first question by Vinny Bonsignore was that about Christian Wilkins and is there any timeline? And he was very short. Like, he didn't have hardly anything to say. When back in OTAs and mandatory minicamp, he was very detailed about the situation. He was saying it was frustrating, but they were going to do everything that they could, to make sure he was back. At this time, he was like, there's no timetable. Right? He was very short and moved on. So that to me, is all playing back in my mind. But this statement from the Raiders on the release of Christian Wilkins, I thought was a very powerful statement. They said, "We have decided that it is the best interest of the organization to move on from Christian Wilkins, and he has been informed of his release from the team. This franchise has a commitment to excellence on and off the field. With no clear path or plan for future return to play for Christian, this transaction is necessary for the entire organization to move forward and prepare for the new season." Again, I thought that was a hell of a message by the Raiders. Normally when you see a statement made by a team on the release of a player or a trade of a player or even a firing of a coach, it's just like, hey, we'd like to thank them for their time with the organization, and we, wish them best on their future endeavors, yada, yada, yada. It's like cookie cutter, just replace the name, this, that, and the other, and whatever they did. If it's a release, it's a release. If it's a firing, it's a firing. But normally, that's kind of what it is. That's not what that statement was at all. Again, we've decided that it is in the best interest of the organization to move on from Christian Wilkins. He has been informed of his release from the team. This franchise has a commitment to excellence on and off the field with no clear path or plan for future return to play for Christian. This transaction is necessary for the entire organization to move forward and prepare for the new season. And that's exactly what this Raiders organization is going to do.
We've all been there. Logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Tired of endless scrolling, trying to find the best deal? Gametime Zone Deals pick the best deals in your section for you. And with Gametime, the price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees. Take the guesswork out of buying concerts and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, the lowest price, guaranteed.
Justin Fields gives the Jets a big scare.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast.
The Jets got a big scare yesterday as Justin Fields suffered an injury during the team's second practice of training camp in 2025. On today's show, we are going to talk about all the implications of Fields' injury. And if you're a Jets fan, I hope you were away from the internet yesterday morning, because it was a nerve-wracking time. I will tell you, I was going for a walk. I was walking to grab a bagel at the local bagel place, and I checked my phone, and I saw the news. Justin Fields limped off the field and was taken to the locker room at the team facility in a cart. And my first thought was, well, if he was able to hop off the field under his own power, and he was sitting in the passenger seat of the cart, so he wasn't on the back of the cart, maybe he's okay. But then my mind started to wander, and I remembered 2 years ago on opening night, Aaron Rodgers also walked off the field on his own power and hopped on the cart when he suffered his torn Achilles injury. And then speculation ran wild over the next couple of hours. In fact, there was a tweet by a fake Adam Schefter account, and that's it's one of the issues we deal with in the world we live in, where there are fake accounts out there who people believe are real, fake insider accounts in the NFL who tweet out news that is not accurate. And this fake Adam Schefter account posted speculation that Fields may have torn his Achilles tendon. And all I could do when I saw that, and this started to pick up steam, and people were saying Schefter said this. Schefter really did not say it. It was a fake Schefter account. I just thought about how ridiculous it would be. For the second time in 3 years, the Jets were about to lose their starting quarterback for the season due to an Achilles injury. And that's just in the last 3 years. I mean, if you think about Jets history, it's unbelievable the number of times the Jets have suffered a critical quarterback injury, either in training camp, in the preseason, or early in the season, that has thrown a season off course. I mean, we could go back to 2022 when Zach Wilson suffered an injury in the first preseason game against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I know it's silly to look back and act like Zach Wilson getting hurt was a big deal, but in the context, he was a second-year quarterback. He was really the hope of the team at that point. And the backup quarterback was Joe Flacco, who, has had an excellent career and went on to have some pretty good days with the Cleveland Browns, but a guy whose best days are clearly behind him. You could go back to 2013, Mark Sanchez going down in the preseason game against the New York Giants, which forced the Jets to put Geno Smith into the lineup. And again, you could say, well, how big of a deal is losing Sanchez? Maybe it's not that big of a deal. It still forced the Jets to put in a quarterback who wasn't ready into the starting lineup. Go back to 2015, the famous Geno Smith, incident when Ike Enikapali punched him in the locker room, pushing Ryan Fitzpatrick into the starting line. Now, again, Fitzpatrick ended up having a good year. But there were also years where a quarterback injury really derailed the Jets. 2003, Chad Pennington suffers an injury in a game against the Giants in the preseason. Jets were coming off a division championship season. There were big things expected of the Jets in 2003. They ended up going 6-10. 2 years later, Pennington goes down in week 3 against Jacksonville. And then his backup, Jay Fiedler, goes down on the same series. And that pretty much derailed that season. Jets ended up going 4-12. And then the ultimate Jets quarterback injury, 1999. The Jets are coming off an AFC championship game berth. And the team they lost to in the AFC championship game, Denver, is clearly taking a step back because John Elway retired. There's nobody standing between the Jets and the Super Bowl. And in the second quarter of the first game of the season, Vinny Testaverde suffers a non-contact injury, an Achilles again. So this could be our third Achilles injury derailing a season in the last 30 years. I mean, how unbelievable would that have been? And I think if you're a Jets fan, you have your guard up right now because nothing ever goes right for this team. And look, on this podcast, we break down what goes wrong with the Jets. And a lot of it's the Jets' fault. A lot of it's the Jets hiring the wrong people. A lot of it's the Jets making all the wrong decisions. A lot of it's the owner who doesn't know what he's doing. But a lot of it's also just ridiculous bad luck. I mean, who trades for a future Hall of Fame quarterback and it gets hyped up all offseason and then watches that quarterback suffer a season-ending injury 4 plays into the season? The Jets do. And what other possible team that after all this happens could lose their next quarterback for the season in the second practice of training camp? And, whenever big Jets news breaks during the day, I start thinking through what I'm going to say on the podcast. And usually on this podcast, we get to one of two emotions. Now, I always try and be hopefully I give you something to think about, but ultimately you probably land in one of two places. You either land on joy or you land on anger. You're either happy with something the Jets do, or more likely because of the way the Jets have operated, you're angry at something the Jets do. But if something had happened to Justin Fields, the emotion just would have been sadness, because during that stretch where it seemed like Fields had suffered a serious injury, I was just sitting down and, I got my bagel and I was eating my bagel. The injury didn't stop me from getting to the bagel place on my walk and having my bagel. But I just sat there thinking, what am I going to say to people? Like, what justification do you have for continuing to support this team that breaks your heart over and over? Whenever you think something good can happen, something bad pops up. And I started thinking about, where we are right now as Jets fans. And, this is the first year of a new head coach and new GM. And that's usually a time of great optimism. You're really excited because you've probably gotten rid of a crew that wasn't working. But even though you've had some rough times in the recent past, you've turned the page. You've moved on to a new regime. There's new hope in the building. But for Jets fans, I think we've just been through that over and over and over. And we've been hopeful over and over and over that there's reluctance. I mean, I think there are people who are cautiously optimistic about Aaron Glenn and Darren Mucci. I count myself among them. I think that there was a lot of good that came through the first offseason. In fact, I would even say there were some decisions that indicate these guys may be different from the past Jets regimes that we've had that have not been so successful. But as a Jets fan at this point, after 14 straight years of no playoffs, after 9 straight years of no winning seasons, you're just expecting things to go bad. And whenever you let your guard down for a second, and look, I don't even think Justin Fields is going to be that great, but he's the quarterback of this team. There's hope around him. He's an interesting project. He's got upside, and to watch it potentially all go out the window and the second track as a training camp, that would have been too much to bear. Well, fortunately, the news came out that it's not that serious, and the news just kept getting better as we progressed through the day. At the end of practice, Glenn indicated that it was a toe injury. So you went from thinking, okay, maybe is it Achilles, is it an ACL? No, it's just a toe injury. Still, though, toe injuries can linger, especially if it's something like turf toe. Then the news came out that it wasn't turf toe, it was a dislocated toe, and then later on, still news came out that Fields is day to day, that this is not something that's really going to derail him even in his training camp. So a big sigh of relief. But this whole episode just shows how vulnerable we all are right now, because you have to have your guard up constantly with this team. And fortunately, this time we caught a break. It wasn't the devastating injury that we all feared. So maybe that's a good sign. Maybe for once, the Jets finally caught a little bit of a break. It's crazy to say, like, when your quarterback suffers an injury the second day of training camp, you caught a break. But if you had told me during that whole saga that the end result would be Justin Fields suffered a dislocated toe in his day-to-day and they think he's going to be ready to go week 1 against the Steelers, which they do, I would have signed up for that in a second, because that seemed like just beyond reasonable at that point. It felt like it was another classic Jets heartbreak moment before the season even began. So maybe this is a good sign. Maybe this is a sign that things are finally starting to go our way. But we're all going to have our guard up until we find that out for sure. Ahead on the Locked On Jets podcast, let's talk about the quarterback who replaced Fields running the first team offense on Thursday after Fields left, and that's Tyrod Taylor. And if anything happens to Tyrod Taylor during the season, if anything happens to Justin Fields during the season, Tyrod Taylor will take over. The Jets have expressed confidence in him. And in all honesty, it's possible if Taylor's the better quarterback than Fields.
Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
Kevin Stefanski must figure out who the starting quarterback is for the Browns sooner rather than later.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast.
The timeline for the quarterback situation is going to be something to monitor throughout training camp. But what I mean by that is like the timeline to name a starter. And Kevin Stefanski was asked about that exact thing on day 1 of training camp, where things sort of stand, when he expects to maybe have an answer to that question. And it's not that I expect that he was going to give like an obvious, like a set date, like, hey, by August 17th, we'll know. I didn't expect that. I don't think anybody should have expected that. What he did say, though, in sort of concluding his answer, was that he hopes it's sooner rather than later. And so what's interesting in how they've sort of set this thing up, it was, same thing on day one that we've seen throughout the spring, splitting the four quarterbacks up. You had the rookies on one field during 7-on-7s, the veterans on another field, sharing reps. And I think that's what makes this whole thing very difficult right now. Like, I've seen 3-way quarterback competitions. I ain't ever seen a 4-way quarterback competition. And so you're trying to maximize as much as you can the reps that are available, who's getting them, when they're getting them, allowing you to evaluate everything that these guys are doing. And that's a difficult thing to pull off. You have the weekend here. You're in helmets. You're in shoulder pads starting here in the next couple days leading into the weekend. Then you have Sunday off. And I think by Monday, you'll start to see a shift in terms of how they're running practice. I think it'll be less about splitting the quarterback room in two. I think it'll be more about, like, all right, in certain drills, like, you're just going to get however many reps you get, and it's going to prioritize the players, most likely Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett, that the team views as most likely to, win this starting job, essentially. And that'll just kind of have to be how it all goes down, I think, from that point moving forward. Now, but that's not an answer to who the starting quarterback is, right? That's still figuring things out, going through the process, evaluating and whatnot. And so it's the next step of this process in this timeline, but it's not giving you the telltale answer. Now, what I think is interesting as we think about when that answer will eventually come at some point, I've been banging the drum on this very show to pay attention to the joint practices. I know the Browns, I'm sure other teams feel this way as well. The Browns really use those sessions to evaluate their team, their players. You're in a controlled setting where you can set the parameters and what you want to work on. Red zone, 2-minute, third down, fourth down, whatever it is, they can, 2-minute offense. There's all sorts of different scenarios that you can play out, and you're doing it against another opponent, not just your own team. And it's the first chance to really sort of evaluate those things. And they put more stock in those than they do the preseason games. And so, as we know, the Browns have 2 of these. They got one coming up in 2 weeks with the Carolina Panthers down in Carolina before they play in the preseason that following Saturday. Then they have one the very next week or 2 days of joint practices, rather, the very next week against the Philadelphia Eagles. And I would venture to guess that is around the time that we will start to get a better sense of, like, who the starting quarterback is going to be, where the team is leaning, where their head's at sort of with this conversation and this discussion, because that feels like the sweet spot for, the evaluation reaching a phase where they feel comfortable making that sort of decision in the grand scheme of things. So again, it's going to be, Carolina's going to sort of be the first test run. I think you will see all the quarterbacks play in that first preseason game. And then the second week will be the joint practices you're using as your biggest tool, where you're getting the most reps and the starters, the ones, technically the ones, especially at the quarterback position, get the most work. They probably won't play as much in that preseason game against the Eagles. And then I think when you return to practice that following week, we'll have a pretty clear indication, and I would guess there'll be some sort of communication from Kevin Stefanski, the coaching staff, of how things kind of sit at that point, and we'll get a better idea of where they're leaning in terms of this competition. That's just a guess. It's sort of theorizing here, because of course they could always just try to pull on this thing as long as they want. But I also think that doesn't help the organization. That doesn't help the team moving forward. Like, you want the quarterback to get out there, and like back in the spring, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot going on back at that phase of the program, or in terms of the work you're doing. It's a lot about installing things. It's a lot about getting guys acclimated, getting guys up to speed, getting guys in shape, those types of things. And when you have 3 quarterbacks who are new to the system, it made sense that, like, Flacco was kind of off to the side, and those guys were taking most of the reps. When you get to this phase of the program, when you get to this phase of the summer, it's more so about building up and ramping up for an NFL season. That's what's happening here. The Browns are counting down to week 1. They're getting themselves prepared to play actual regular season games, play actual football, all those different things. And so because of that, like, the priorities have changed. You have to have a sense of where you're at with this quarterback competition, who's going to be the starter, because those last couple of weeks of the summer, I know training camp sort of ends mid-month, but those last couple of weeks of the summer, you're going to want your starting quarterback to just be focusing on building rapport with his teammates, building rapport with his weapons, getting that chemistry going, and just be able to kind of hit the ground running with stuff you want to do within the offense and go from there. So as I think about the timeline, as I hear Kevin Stefanski's remarks on it, and he says sooner rather than later, I think the sweet spot for what is sooner in their minds and what should be in all of our minds is probably that week of, if not that week after the joint practices with the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm guessing they'll execute those. They'll go through those. They'll sit down after the preseason game that weekend and really evaluate where they're at, how they feel, and make a decision sort of on here's our starting quarterback and moving forward. And we'll kind of know mid August, because I think that the joint practices of the 13th and the 14th, I believe, of August, we'll have a better sense of where this thing's headed at that juncture of the summer, I think, here leading up to, of course, week 1 of the regular season on September 7th. So keep an eye on that, follow along, of course. And speaking of the quarterbacks, if there's one thing day one taught us about the competition, about the depth charts, it's that not much has changed. Not much has changed in the Browns quarterback competition since we last saw these guys back at the end of minicamp in June. I mentioned it in the first segment, but the concept of, hey, when they break off for 7-on-7s, it's the rookies on one field, it's the veterans on another, and they're maximizing those reps for each. Veterans with the ones largely, and probably a mix of twos, the rookies with the twos, the threes, and the fours, and that's kind of how they've been treating this thing. That very much stayed the same on day 1 of training camp. I'm anticipating it's going to stay the same on day 2 of minicamp. I'm expecting that to sort of stay the same really through the next several days of practice, including Saturday, which is one of this day 2 of the open sessions for fans to attend. And then I think it maybe flips a little bit and changes a little bit when they return to practice after Sunday's day off on Monday. And so we'll see if that's how it really does transpire. But in terms of the way that they handled reps, very, very similar to what we've seen in what we saw at minicamp. Same thing applied in the 11-on-11 portion of practice, where it was Kenny Pickett up first with the ones, Dylan Gabriel up next with the twos, and Shedeur Sanders up third with the threes, and Joe Flacco sort of serving as that spectator, if you will, during that portion of practice. Again, we all want answers as to what all that means. I think it's simple. I think it's just this team knows what they have in Joe Flacco. I don't think they need to see a ton of reps of him, especially in this setting, where it's, again, helmets and jerseys, even helmets and shoulder pads when those come on in the next couple of days, not necessarily the time you need to see Joe Flacco. And he's already kind of talked about the idea that, like, a lot of this is out of his control. Like, he just kind of goes with the flow. Whatever decision they make, he can only control what he can control. So he's just focused on the task at hand, focused on the reps that he's going to get. And I think they've signaled at this point he kind of has a leg up on these guys just naturally because he's been in the system. You know what to expect. He's a veteran in this league. He's 40 years old. Like, what more do you need to see from Joe Flacco at this point in his career is what the sense that I get from this. And things will, I think, more so ramp up for him once the pads come on, and that'll be where the competition really sort of takes its next big turn. And Joe even mentioned this too, like, day 1, they only really ran like 20 so plays in general in 11-on-11 work. Like, so what are you going to give 4 plays per guy like that? It just doesn't make a lot of sense right now that they're like, having to distribute them evenly, including Joe Flacco. So I think he kind of has, again, I've called it, I think, a first round bye before. I think he kind of has a first round bye right now as they get back into the swing of things here at camp. But in terms of like how the other 3 quarterbacks essentially looked, and Flacco did, for what it's worth, look good in the modified 7-on-7s, where it's basically you have 7 guys on defense. You have an offensive line in front of you with the defensive line that's just other reserve offensive linemen, not really rushing the passer or anything. He did what you would expect Joe Flacco to do in a setting like that, where there's not really a pass rush bearing down on you. He looks like Joe Flacco. He's as sturdy and steady as they come. He's consistent, and that was obviously a good sign. But as far as the other 3 guys, especially in that 11-on-11 portion of practice where they handled all the reps in a shared sort of space, Pickett with the ones, Gabriel with the twos, Sanders with the threes, I think of the 3 quarterbacks, I think that Kenny Pickett had the most consistent of the 3, had the most consistent day, and probably his best day since he's been here with the Browns